God, Bryan.
He says skibidity, I'm out, or whatever that word is.
Hello and welcome to JudgeCast. This is episode 354. I'm one of your hosts, Bryan Perlman, and I am joined this evening, afternoon, morning drive to work by the one and only Charles Feather.
Hello, hello.
And the one and only Marco Sanchez.
Hello, everybody.
Hello. And, so we've been doing a Learn to Be L1 video series on YouTube, sponsored by Judge Foundry. And one of the consequences of doing a lot of rules-based videos, it's just rules, is a lot of our episodes, our podcast episodes, have tended to be more on policy or running events or stuff like that. So we have decided to change that, and we're going to do a super crunchy rules episode here, but possibly not the crunchy rules episode you wanted, but definitely the one you deserve. So if it's not good, what does that say about you?
You
Who
definitely
deserves
deserve
this?
All right, so what are we doing?
We're going to cover all of our favorite special little unique snowflakes that are in the CR. So today, for some reason, we've decided we haven't had enough release notes episodes. We're going to do another one, but this is all about card-specific notes that have unique CR entries exclusively to make them work the way they were written or designed. These are the parts of the comp rules that make you go, what in the world is this for? And it's just that one random card that might have been printed 20 years ago or 2 weeks ago. Who knows? Because they're still doing very, very weird things in Magic now.
So this is not the same as mechanically unique cards. For example, there is a card from Legends called Divine Intervention that causes the game to end in a draw. That is mechanically unique, but the rules for that are not particularly unique, even though the card is. We're also not going to be talking about conspiracies or silver border cards.
Although there are some cards from unsets, but we'll get to that.
Yes. We're going to stay away from silver border acorn cards. And then one thing that we're not going to touch on with a 10-foot pole is cards that don't actually have CR entries. So if you're wanting to know what CR entry tells me how Equinox works, we're not going to be giving you that CR entry because one doesn't exist. Go on, look it up.
The entry does not exist.
The entry does not, 404 not found. All right. So to do this particular episode, because this would require a whole lot of research, we are relying on, it was shared in one of the Discords. Someone let me know that unique CR references is a tag in Scryfall. So Scryfall has this amazing system, shout out to Scryfall, hashtag not sponsored, a system where people go in, it's almost like Wikipedia editors for like various tags. So if you're looking for like cards of people with hats, there's a tag for that. If you were looking for cards with people with hats, because that's been so popular recently. If you're looking for cards with people with hats.
Are you stuck in a loop? Are you stuck in a loop? Here, let me talk about Tagger for a second because I've actually done this.
Okay, cool.
Scryfall Tagger is a feature that Scryfall first used as a little side project. And what they would do is they had the entire card library in there, and you could go in and search either by like a set or however, and you could go in and you could actually edit. And I forget if you had to do the Patreon first, but you could actually go in and edit the art tags. So you could have, if a card had a dinosaur, you would tag it dinosaur. If the card had a person yelling, you would tag it open mouth. If the person had a hat, you would tag the art with hat. Whatever was unique about the art, whatever stood out about the art, you would actually be able to tag it. So this is kind of morphed and you can actually tag it in several different ways, not just with art. And one of the ways that you can tag it is with unique CR entries, interestingly enough. Tagger's a great project, and in fact, it was kind of incorporated into the regular side of Scryfall, I think, not long ago. And you can just find cards based on the art. So if you want all of your heroes left-facing, you can search that way and find all of your characters for your left-facing commander deck. Whatever you want to do. Tagger's cool, and in this case, it's actually helping us do a rules episode. Neat. And with that,
yeah. So I'll tackle the first one. It is one Zack Fair from Final Fantasy. We're going to go in reverse alphabetical order because it was an editing decision I made very early on, quickly regretted it, but was too stubborn to go back and change the order of things in the show notes. So you're just going to deal with it in reverse alphabetical order. All right, the card Zack Fair for a single white is a 0/1 human soldier. Zack Fair enters with a +1/+1 counter and has an ability that says 1, sacrifice Zack Fair, target creature you control gains indestructible until end of turn. Put Zack Fair's counters on that creature and attach an equipment that was attached to Zack Fair to that creature. Now you might wonder yourself, what's the CR there? What's the unique rule there? Well, we didn't actually have a rule that defined what it meant to put its counters on another creature for activated abilities where you sacrifice it during the activation. So there is a rule, 122.9, if an activated ability of an object, which this is, instructs a player to put its counters on another object, and sacrificing the object with those counters is a cost to activate that ability, the player doesn't move the counters from one object to the other. Rather, the player puts the same number of each kind of counter the first object had onto the second. Okay, we've got rules like that for triggered abilities. We just didn't have one for activated abilities where you sacrifice the creature during the activation. So just a taste of how pedantic we're going to be getting during this episode.
Very, very pedantic. Marcus, you want to do the next one?
Sure.
Oh, so you're setting up for the one after that, Charles? All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, he wants it. Let's go. I'm going to go with the relatively easy one. Yuriko, the Tiger's Shadow, 1 a blue and a black, legendary creature, human ninja. All my commander players love this one. It is a legendary human ninja with commander ninjutsu, which says pay blue and a black, return an unblocked attacker you control to hand, put this card onto the battlefield from your hand or the command zone, tapped and attacking, and then some other fun ninja stuff. But the unique rule for this one, as you can imagine, has to do with Commander Ninjutsu. 702.49D. Commander Ninjutsu is a variant of the ninjutsu ability that also functions while the card with Commander Ninjutsu is in the command zone, because otherwise ninjutsu only works from your hand. Why would it need to work from anywhere else until you decided to make a Commander Ninjutsu card? Pretty simple to understand as to why you need a special rule specifically to make it work from the command zone.
And one thing that often gets glossed over because it's so often the commander is Commander Ninjutsu also works from the hand.
Also, yes.
Yes. Okay, Charles.
I don't know why I wanted this one. I really don't.
Okay.
Worms of the Earth for 2 black, black, black is an enchantment that has the tantalizing text, no new land may be brought into... Wait a second. That's not what it actually says. We have Oracle text on this, so let's read the Oracle text. Players can't play lands. Lands can't enter the battlefield. At the beginning of each upkeep, any player may sacrifice 2 lands of their choice or have this enchantment deal 5 damage to that player. If a player does either, destroy this enchantment. Well, that's fascinating. Weird. These old Magic cards are just weird. So anyway, this has brought about Oracle... no, not Oracle text. Comp Rule 111.5, which is, if a spell or ability would create a token, but a rule or effect states that a permanent with one or more of that token's characteristics can't enter the battlefield, the token is not created. Similarly, yeah, that's why I hate this one. I don't even like saying that word. Also, if an effect would create a token that is a copy of an instant or sorcery card, no token is created. So somehow you create a token that's a copy of a land. The token copy isn't even created in this case because lands can't enter the battlefield. Now you might be saying, wait, there's a lot of cards that say X can't enter the battlefield, and no, there really aren't. And they all specify that X can't enter from certain zones as a rule.
Okay. Also, as Charles read out that second part of the rule, similarly, if an effect would create a token that's a copy of an instant or sorcery card, no token is created. I think, okay, there's a lot of cards, but I think Merkel, Lord of Bones, might be the only card that uses that part of the rule. Because if you have a manifested, so that's face down, instant or sorcery, and it dies, then Merkel would try to create
that's a copy of that card, so it wouldn't care that it was a. Oh God, that's
right.
So dumb. I was wondering how the hell do you create a. Oh God. Okay, sure.
Right, and it's not like it. These token copies aren't created in exile and then enter the battlefield. They're like bam, right there. All right. Next up, is it my turn?
Yeah.
Wall of Stolen Identity is a 0/0 shapeshifter wall. The best kind of walls. It says, you may have Wall of Stolen Identity enter the battlefield as a copy of any creature on the battlefield, except it has wall in addition to its other types and has defender. When you do, okay, tap the copied creature and it doesn't untap during its controller's untap step for as long as you control Wall of Stolen Identities. So we have an ability that has a reflexive trigger in it, because when you do is a reflexive trigger. Okay, so as it enters, you may have it become a copy. All right, this one's a little hard to explain, but that was the setup. So the rule is 707.9g, some replacement effects that generate copy effects are linked to triggered abilities written in the same paragraph, what we were just talking about. If another copy effect is applied to that object after applying the copy effect with the linked triggered ability, the ability doesn't trigger. So what happens is because remember, we apply copy effects in layers or in timestamp order. So if I'm playing Wall of Stolen Identity and I'm having it become a copy of a bear cub, and then there is a second copy effect and a third copy effect that gets layered, we still do each of those copy effects. Even though the last one's ultimately going to win, the first one and the second one still actually get applied in timestamp order. They just get stomped on top of. So what this is saying is basically, hey, even though that copy effect did apply, because it later got wiped out by the second or third copy as it's entering the battlefield, we're not going to do that trigger. So you don't get to do something cheeky where you get the triggered ability, but it's not a Wall of Stolen Identity anymore. Or it's not a Bear Cub wall anymore. Okay? Clear as mud?
Love it.
Super.
Yeah, so you thought that was fun with layers. Set you up for the next one.
I'm just gonna read the name out because any real Layers nerds will absolutely love hearing this card name. Volrath's Shapeshifter. I almost don't need to say any more, but I'm gonna say a lot more. So, Volrath's Shapeshifter, 1 blue for an 0/1 creature shapeshifter that has the Oracle text. As long as the top card of your graveyard is a creature card, Volrath's Shapeshifter has the full text of that card and has the text, 2 generic mana, discard a card. Okay, so 612.6 specifically calls out this card. One card, Volrath's Shapeshifter, states that an object has the full text, in quotes, of another object. This changes not just the text that appears on the object's text box and type line, but also changes the text that represents the name, mana cost, color indicator, power, and toughness. Full text. Only card that does that.
Yep. So why is this not a copy? If we're copying all of the text or gaining all of the text, why is this not a copy effect?
Because layers. So
Okay.
walking through the layers, and that might be a general answer to a lot of these cards, actually. But so originally, this card did actually just become a copy of a creature instead of just copying the full text. But some weird things will happen there, particularly when you interact with the control layer. So let's say Bryan has a Volrath shapeshifter that he owns and casts and resolves. Then, if it were a copy effect, it would apply on the copy. But then, let's say I gain control of that creature through some means. My control effect would apply in the layer after copy.
Layer 2.
Layer 2.
Copy's layer 1.
Copy, control, text type, blah, 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 all the rest of them. But we have copy first, then control. So when I gain control, the copy effect would have already applied, meaning I would control Bryan's Volrath shapeshifter that is the full text of the bear cub in his graveyard, because of course there's one in there. But if I control it, it would be the top card of Bryan's graveyard, because the copy effect is already in place of his graveyard before I gain control of it.
When before layer 2, which is what gives Marcos control over my Volrath shapeshifter. During layer 1, evaluating layer 1, because we have not evaluated control changing things, for the purpose of that layer 1, I am still the controller.
Right.
So it is copying.
It's still your graveyard. You control it
It's
because
copying,
I haven't taken control yet.
Right. Even though you absolutely do control it as we are going through the layers, because we have not evaluated the control layer yet, I am still the person that it would be looking, if it was a copy effect, the top card of my library. And then we would go on to layer 2 and be like, oh, and Marcos has it. And that's why it has to be after, it has to be in the text layer.
Yeah. It has to be full text as opposed to just copy of that card.
This card was written way back before layer 1, layer 2 were really solidified. So, yay.
Real weird card.
Yeah. Now, there's also an error in the CR. Charles, do you want to take this one?
Okay. Let's see. Exchange of words. Oh, look at the cute little card. Okay. So exchange of words is 1 blue, and it's an enchantment. And it says, when exchange of words enters the battlefield, choose 2 target creatures. For as long as exchange of words remain on the battlefield, exchange the text boxes of those creatures. Neat. Yeah. So we have 612.5 for that one. Marcos was talking about 612.6. 612.5 is for exchange of words, and it says one card, exchange of words, instructs a player to exchange the text boxes of 2 objects. This replaces all of the rules text of each object with the rules text of the other object. In games involving certain cards that aren't covered by these rules, other elements of the text box may be exchanged. So for that, you would see Rule 100.7. But there's currently a second card that does this. And so it's no longer a single call out. I guess it just, the CR hasn't been updated because our good friend, the breaker of the fourth wall, Deadpool, does that as well. Deadpool has the text, as Deadpool enters, you may exchange this text box and another creatures. So the actual rules text reads slightly different, but it's doing the same exact thing.
Yep. Update me like one of your French CR entries. All right.
Love it.
Now, I'm going to read you a card, okay? And you tell me if it's immediately obvious what the CR entry is, okay? Vizier of Many Faces says, you may have vizier of sure. You may have vizier, because there's vizier, and viziest. So you may have the Vizier of Many Faces enter the battlefield as a copy of any creature on the battlefield, except Vizier of Many Faces was embalmed, or if Vizier of Many Faces was embalmed, the token has no mana cost, it's white, and it's a zombie in addition to its other types. Okay, doesn't seem anything special about that. Oh, nope.
Yeah.
No,
super straightforward.
I don't see anything.
The CR has to define what it means to be embalmed. 702.128b, a token is embalmed if it's created by a resolving embalmed ability. That's right. We got to have a CR just to define what embalmed means. There's another card called Mistbind Click, which has kind of the same thing. When it enters the battlefield, you champion a fairy. And then it says, when a fairy is championed with Mistbind Click, tap all lands target player controls. Got to have a CR entry to define what championed means.
CR entry to define English to us effectively.
Yes.
But it makes sense. The game doesn't know it, so game's got to know it. Also, rewinding just a little bit, you'd be surprised, but this specific question of Deadpool and text box happening after control actually came up during the CEDH event I had judged last weekend, where literally people were asking, like, what happens if I take control of somebody else's Deadpool? So this actually does matter, people. It's real, at least in the world of Silly Commander.
Have I told you the game that I played where I was running my Morph Manifest Cloak and Disguise deck, and one of my opponents was running Deadpool, and
oh no,
Deadpool swapped text boxes with an Ixodron.
Oh no!
And then later that Ixodron died, and I brought it back to the battlefield.
Oh no!
Yeah, it was. Yep, there was a thing. There was quite a moment where during the game, people were like just shouting at me what happened. And I was like, hold on. I got this. And just, like, I need quiet. Let me cook. You know? All
that
right.
is not a phrase I expected to hear Bryan talk about today.
No, it's entirely too modern.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh man, Bryan is he's catching up to the rest of us. We need new lingo. All right. Let's talk about
chat.
Oh no. We've created a
Let's
monster.
talk about Trinisphere. Everybody's favorite card, and one we talked about.
I'm farming Aura.
Oh God, Bryan.
He says skibidity, I'm out, or whatever that word is.
Oh, this is supposed to be a Crunchy Rules episode. What is this nonsense?
Yeah, no, just go on.
Trinisphere. It does the 3 thing. Moving on. Oh, you want more? Okay, fine. Trinisphere has a rule. Well, okay, let's talk about Trinisphere. We talked about this in our L1 Essentials episode when it talks about casting a spell. And we kind of glossed over the Trinisphere part because, let's face it, that's not necessary for the L1 test. But that's why you come to the podcast for all the really crunchy stuff and shenanigans. So Trinisphere says, as long as Trinisphere is untapped, each spell that would cost less than 3 mana to cast costs 3 mana to cast. So this one has an entire entry, 601.2F, that effectively is just talking about what that means to cost 3 mana, because some people might get confused. Does that mean I have to have 3 generic mana? What if I have a 1 and a black, etc., etc.? So this rule goes over how a player determines the total cost of the spell. Once the total cost is determined, any effects that directly affect the total cost are applied. That is specifically Trinisphere. And then the resulting total cost becomes locked in. So this one rule is why we have the phrase in casting a spell that is, and then you account for Trinisphere.
3 ball. Speaking of 3, Tifa's Limit Break is the next card. For 1 green, it's an instant, and it is a tiered card from Final Fantasy. So tiered means that you can choose an additional cost to have the spell upgraded, basically. The first cost is 0, and it's Somersault, and it has target creature gets +2/+2 until end of turn. If you decide to pay 2 extra, so 2 and a green, you would get double target creature's power and toughness until end of turn. And if you decide to pay 6 and a green extra, so 6, a green, and a green, you would get triple target creature's power and toughness until end of turn. Now, when I read this and I read the notes after it, I was like, wait, I've seen the word triple before on Magic cards. And yes, dear listener, you have. You've seen it in terms of triple damage. But this is the singular case where we have triple in terms of power and toughness. So there's a section of the CR, 701.11, that defines what it means to triple power and toughness. And I'm not going to read all of it because it's a whole lot of things that just basically explain, yes, it gets tripled.
Well, just like doubling is it, if a creature gets doubles its power, it gets plus X plus O, where X is its current power. Tripling is it gets twice plus X plus O.
Yeah. 2x.
Where X is or rather it gets
plus 2x.
Yeah, where X is its current power. Yep.
Or
right.
in this case, plus 2x and plus 2y, because power and toughness are different.
Yes. Yep. All right. Next up, Tybalt's Trickery is 1 and a red. It's an instant. This is counter target spell. Choose 1, 2, or 3 at random. Its controller mills that many cards, then exiles cards from the top of their library until they exile a non-land card with a different name than that spell. They may cast that card without paying its mana cost. Then put the exiled cards on the bottom of their library in random order. You go, okay. There's a lot going on with the text of this card. What could the unique CR entry for this card be? And it is 201.2c. Some spells or abilities check if one object has a different name than a second object or group of objects. All right, yeah, this is doing that. We are countering the spell, and then we're milling cards from the top of the library until they exile a non-land card with a different name than that spell. Cool. So the first object has a different name than those objects if the first object has at least one name and no names in common with any of the other objects, even if one or more of those objects has no name. Okay, so I guess this is like you exile or you counter a spell like a morph creature because those don't have any names.
Yep.
Right? And then you somehow are comparing cards and you have a card in your library with no name. Takes care of that. So if the first object has, then it says, if the first object has no name, it does not have a different name than any of the other objects, even if those other objects themselves have names.
What if you've been in the desert on a horse with no name?
Then that has trample over CR entries.
Amazing.
Sorry.
No, that's fantastic. Because I was thinking of a segue for Thrasta Tempest's Roar, which is one of the most ridiculous cards I've ever seen, and then immediately forgot about because it never sees play anywhere. But Thrasta Tempest's Roar for 10 green is a 7/7 legendary creature dinosaur with the spell cost less. It has a cost reduction on there. It has trample. It has haste. It has trample over planeswalkers. What? So, this card, this is a great example of when you see a rule and you kind of just get the rule. Like, I think in Unsets they had this with like Triple Strike, where it was like, you look at Triple Strike and you get it. Like, you know what First Strike is. You know what Double Strike is. You figure out intuitively what Triple Strike
is. Or
Last
Strike. Right?
Last Strike.
There was Triple Strike and Last Strike.
Okay.
But if you were to try to turn that into actual rules, the juice doesn't really become worth the squeeze. And in this instance, this is kind of an example of that. So in order to make these 3 words, trample over planeswalkers, work within the rules, there are 3 entire new rules added to the CR. Firstly is 702.19c. Specifically, it just says, trample over planeswalkers is a variant of trample that modifies the rules for assigning combat damage to planeswalkers specifically. This is really long, so I'm just going to highlight some of the important parts of the text of this rule. Feel free to jump into the CR later on if you want to. The next really important part is, if that creature is attacking a planeswalker after lethal damage is assigned to all blocking creatures, and damage at least equal to the loyalty of the planeswalker the creature is attacking is assigned to that planeswalker, further excess damage may be assigned as the attacking creature's controller chooses among the blocking creatures, etc. But it walks you through, okay, you're trampling over the planeswalker to the defending player. Cool, we get it. There's like 2 or 3 times that amount of text in this rule, including an example of what happens when you're attacking with a 1/1 and a 7/7 with trample over planeswalkers, and how you assign damage to the first creature, then to the planeswalker, and then to the defending player. Then we have 702.19d. And this effectively, I think, just adds the word trample over planeswalkers to how if an attacking creature with trample is blocked, but there are no creatures blocking it when damage is assigned, then the damage is assigned to the defending player and or planeswalker, as though all blocking creatures have been assigned lethal damage. Simple enough. If you have trample, add the variant into it. The next one is interesting. 702.19e, if a creature with trample over planeswalkers is attacking a planeswalker, and that planeswalker is removed from combat, the creature's damage may be assigned to the defending player once all blocking creatures have been dealt lethal damage, or if there are no blocking creatures when damage is assigned, all its damage is assigned to the defending player. This is an exception to another rule, 506.4c, and does not cause the creature to be attacking that player. Woof. So all these little tweaks have to be made to the CR to just make those 3 words make sense when you have to factor in really weird scenarios. And finally, where this card becomes a real brain teaser twister is what happens if the planeswalker you're attacking is also a creature and it blocks itself. Well, thankfully, there's already a rule in the CR for that. We don't have to worry about that here. Moving on.
So from Thunder Lizard to Thunder Dude controlling a storm, we have Storm King's Thunder. For X, red and a red, it's an instant. It has the text, when you cast your next instant or sorcery spell this turn, copy that spell X times. You may choose new targets for the copies. Well, that sounds reasonable, right? It sounds like something that would just work without any special rules. Unfortunately, no. What we're doing is we're setting up a delayed trigger here. And because of that, we need to figure out what X is. But the spell's gone. It's in the graveyard. So how do we know that? And luckily, we have 103.7n come along to tell us that if a delayed trigger ability created by a resolving spell or ability refers to X, X is not defined in the text of that triggered ability, and the spell or ability that created it had a value of X chosen for any of its costs, the value of X for the triggered ability is the same as the value of X for the spell that created it. So basically, the triggered ability has memory looking back at what the spell was doing at the time. And the rule is necessary so that the delayed triggered ability can, time warp a little bit. Cool.
All right. Now, you might be wondering, what makes a party good?
Chips. You got to have chips.
Chips. Yep, chips. You got to have punch and pie. More people will come if you have punch and pie.
And a free hat.
Yes, sure. There is one card, Stick Together, for 3 white sorcery that says each player chooses a party from among creatures they controlled and sacrifices the rest. So that's right, this card defines what a party is. Okay, you must choose a party. To do so, to choose your party, for each of the creature types listed in another rule, that is a cleric, rogue, warrior, and wizard, you choose up to one creature of that type. Choose up to one creature they control of that type for each type. That is how you make a party in D&D. I tend to not like, if you mix rogues and clerics, it might be entertaining, but it might not be a party either in real life.
I'm so happy I got this next card. This is actually one of my favorite cards from this set. And I think actually this card might have led to me starting to look into things that led me down the road to become a judge in the first place. This card is Spy Kit, and it is from the amazing Draft Matters set Conspiracy. So it is a 2 generic mana artifact equipment that says equipped creature gets +1/+1 and has all names of non-legendary creature cards in addition to its name, equipped for 2 generic mana. So this caused the creation of CR 612.7. One card, Spy Kit, states that an object has all names of non-legendary creatures. This changes the text that represents the object's name. That object has the name of each non-legendary creature card in the Oracle card reference. So this is a text-changing effect, but it just boggled my brain the first time I saw this, and I was like, wait, what is that? How do you, what? I love this card. It's so much fun.
This was meant to be. It really was.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, it was. If you're playing at home, we know that we're doing this in reverse alphabetical order. And if you know cards that have special rules attached to them, unique rules attached to them, you probably actually know which card is next and why I'm smiling behind the microphone. That's right. We've got Space Balerin, otherwise known to the kids as Space Jace. It is 2 a white and a blue for 3 loyalty. It is a legendary planeswalker of the Jace subtype. Cool, cool. It has the weird ability called Space Sculptor, which has some reminder text, and we're going to actually do the CR, so we're not going to talk about the reminder text here. And then it has 3 abilities, a +1, a -1, and a -5. And they all relate to the Space Sculptor thing. +1 is creatures in each sector can be blocked this turn only by creatures in the same sector. What's a sector? -1, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature in the sector of your choice. And then -5, destroy all creatures in the sector of your choice. Wow, let's dig into this. 702.158 is where we find this, along with the subheadings of that, A through E. First off, it's just titled Space Sculptor, and then we get into one card, Space Balerin, has the Space Sculptor ability. This keyword ability causes creatures to gain sector designations. Well, let's find out what that is. A sector designation is a designation a permanent can have. The sector designations are alpha, beta, and gamma sectors. Only permanents can have a sector designation. So, it has to be a permanent on the battlefield. It can't be in the graveyard and have a sector designation. Once a permanent gets a sector designation, it keeps it until no player controls a permanent with Space Sculptor or an ability whose source has Space Sculptor. A sector designation is not part of the permanent's copyable values. Okay. So, if we were to copy a card in a sector, it doesn't necessarily retain the alpha or beta or gamma sector designation. Anytime a permanent with Space Sculptor and any creatures without a sector designation are on the battlefield at the same time, each player who controls one or more of these creatures and doesn't control a permanent with the Space Sculptor chooses a sector designation for each of those creatures they control. Then, each other player who controls one or more of those creatures chooses a sector designation for each of those creatures they control. This is a state-based action. We have a whole state-based action around sectors. And that's also a reference to a 704.5U. And if we were to look that up, I'm sure that's what it's talking about. The next one is some abilities include an instruction to choose a sector along with an instruction to perform an action on each creature in that sector. To do this, choose one of the 3 sector designations that perform that action on each creature within the sector designation. So that's referencing the different loyalty abilities and how they're applied. 2 permanents are in the same sector if each has the same sector designation. So if you have, a bear cub on one side and it's in sector alpha, and if I have a goblin and it's also in sector alpha, they're both in alpha sector.
Right?
Yeah, that's a lot.
Yep,
cool.
That's a lot. Next up, we're going to talk about Soulfire. Soulfire Eruption. For 6 red. It is a sorcery that says choose any number of target creatures, planeswalkers, and or players. For each of them, exile the top card of your library. Then Soulfire Eruptions deals damage equal to that card's converted mana cost to that permanent or player. You may play the exiled card until the end of turn. All right. So in the section of the rules for resolving spells and abilities, there's a rule that talks about how some spells and abilities include actions taken on multiple players and or objects. Okay, generally speaking, those actions are all processed simultaneously, and that's what Rule 608.2F says. However, there's a special call out in that rule that says if the action can't be processed simultaneously, it's instead processed considering each of the affected players or objects individually. AppNap order is used to make the primary determination of the order of these actions. Okay. And that's what this has right here in Soulfire, where it says, for choose any number of creatures, planeswalkers, and players. For each of them, exile the top. So that is you cannot exile the top cards of your library for each of those creatures, planeswalkers, and players. You have to do this simultaneously. And that's what we've got here, the CR entry for.
Next up is a relatively simple card. It's called Sideswipe. It is 1 and a red for an instant that says, you may change any targets of target arcane spell. Now, the cool thing about this, you might think, what is unique about this? Changing targets is a thing we do all the time. But you might not have noticed that anytime you are told to change targets, you either choose one target and it gets changed, or you have to change all the targets. This templating lets you do some of them. So if you have a modal spell that has multiple targets on there, then you might want to say, oh, let me change one of these targets, not all of them. This will allow you to change a target. So the rule for this is 115.7c. If an effect allows a player to change any targets, quote unquote, of a spell or ability, the process described in rule 115.7a is followed, except that any number of those targets may be changed rather than all of them or none of them.
Right. And this was kind of in our episode that we did on targets, and we were going over like the rules for change the targets, change a target, and then we got to change any targets, and we were like, why is this is weird. Why are they making this type of distinction? And I think I figured out why. Okay, and I think it's because this is saying you may change any targets of target arcane spell, and this was the set with splice onto arcane, so you could start adding text. You could sit there and start adding text to cards.
Yeah.
So I think the reason why they did any targets instead of where it says change the targets, you either have to change everything to legal targets or you can't change any of them, or change a target, which is just changing one. With this any, where you can do some, was a concession to splice onto arcane.
Yeah, the build your own spell super dream of having like 7 things all spliced onto one.
Yep.
Sick.
Next card, Serum Powder. It's an artifact for 3 mana. This is a weird card. You're laughing, and I have to agree with you.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Aren't all of these cards that we've gone over kind of weird?
Yeah, but
like you just did Space Sculptor.
Yeah. This is weirder to me, and we'll talk about
this is weirder than Space Sculptor.
It is. Okay. It is, because Space Sculptor, works within a predefined set of nonsense rules. I don't know why anybody would want this card in their deck. You can tap it to add 1 generic mana to one colorless mana to your pool, but it also has anytime you could mulligan and Serum Powder is in your hand, you may exile all the cards from your hand, then draw that many cards. Well, obviously we're going to talk about mulliganing here, and this is neat. 103.5b has an effect would allow a player to perform an action anytime that player could mulligan. The player may perform that action at a time they would declare whether they will take a mulligan. This needs not be in the first round of mulligans, so you could be on your mull to 3 and choose to do this. Other players may have already made their mulligan declarations by the time the player has the option to perform this action. So you don't have to preemptively, before the other person has to make their mulligan decision, say, oh, I have something weird in my hand, I'm going to do it. If the player performs the action, then they declare whether they will take a mulligan. I just got to ask, because I've never seen this card played. I have no idea why this is really important. I can't imagine anybody really wanting to do it. But when you do this and you exile, let's say you exile the 7 cards in your hand because of the current mulligan rules, those cards stay exiled for the remainder of the game, right? They're just gone?
Yep.
If you don't choose to do another mulligan. Or if you do choose to do another mulligan, do they get shuffled back in? I would imagine that they do. I don't know. I think the rule...
I don't believe they do.
I don't believe they do. They don't, right? They just stay in exile because the game started, You're just resolving draws? Yeah, that makes sense.
So it's a free mulligan.
It is, but you're also cheating yourself of 7 of your cards in your library.
Only if you choose to do it.
Only if you choose to do it. And I've never seen it played, and I played this set. It's from one of the Masters sets, right? I think that's what that set symbol is. Neat. I'm sure it's an older card than that, though, because if it's from a Masters set, then it was probably around before.
Darksteel.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense.
All right. Next up is Sarah Paragon. All right. So Sarah Paragon, this is how long ago was this card? I wanted to say like fairly recent, but no, it's been a hot minute, hasn't it?
It just rotated.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. So this one actually has when this card first came out, and I'm going to go ahead and read this to you. It's 2 white for a 3/4 angel flying. It says, once each of your turns, you may play a land from your graveyard or cast a permanent spell with mana 3 or less from your graveyard. When you do, it gains this permanent is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, exile it, and you gain 2 life. This card originally didn't work. They had to add some rules to support this. And one of those rules is still unique to Sarah Paragon, I believe. And that is 400.7i. It is one of the exception cases for when an object moves from one zone to another, it becomes a new object with no memory or relation to its previous existence. That rule has the following exceptions. This is one of the exceptions, and that is if an effect allows you to play a land, or an effect allows a land card to be played, other parts of that effect can find the new object that land card becomes after it moves to the battlefield. So this is the land gaining that when this permanent is put into the graveyard from the battlefield, exile it and you gain 2 life. The creature part, or the permanent spell part, is actually handled by another similar exception case, but that's actually covered by Henzi, I think. They share that exception.
Wild. I love how some cards just look super simple and like really easy to execute and go, oh, no, I have to write a whole new... Well, no. Just has to write a whole new rule for it.
That's how these errors kind of happen, is because you just read it and you're just like, well, obviously that works. And then, oh no, like Zack Fair up at the beginning. Yeah, obviously that... Well, nope, it doesn't work. It doesn't work.
All right, so next up we have an oldie but a goodie. We have the card Reset. For a blue and a blue, it is an instant that says, cast Reset only during an opponent's turn after their upkeep step. Untap all lands you control. So this is interesting. This creates the rule 503.2 that says if a spell states that it may be cast only after a player's upkeep step, and the turn has multiple upkeep steps, that spell may be cast any time after the first upkeep step ends. So this is more put into place for newer cards that are starting to interact with giving you extra steps and phases. For example, in Outlaws of Thunder Junction, there was Obika, Splitter of Seconds, that says whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you get that many additional upkeep steps after this phase. Or Bryan's favorite, the Ninth Doctor, which whenever the Ninth Doctor becomes untapped, during your untap, you get an additional upkeep step. This just kind of has to define how can I not cast it during an upkeep step? Do I have to wait until the second, the third, the fifth? Where do I actually cast this? And so it has to define it somehow.
That brings us to something out of Legend, really. Rasputin Dreamweaver.
Figuratively and literally,
Literally, yes. It is a 4 white and a blue for a 4/1 legendary creature human wizard. Because, yeah, of course he's a wizard. Rasputin has the following text on it. Rasputin Dreamweaver enters the battlefield with 7 dream counters on it. Remove a dream counter from Rasputin, add 1 to your mana pool. Remove a dream counter from Rasputin, prevent the next 1 damage that would be dealt to Rasputin this turn. At the beginning of your upkeep, if Rasputin started the turn untapped, put a dream counter on it. Rasputin can't have more than 7 dream counters on it. Okay, so aside from being a creepy old dude on a card carrying a weird staff, Rasputin has something really kind of unique about it. It's a single state-based action just for this guy. If a permanent with an ability that says it can't have more than N counters of a certain kind on it, has more than N counters of that kind on it. What are they? Dream counters? Dream counters. All but N
He's
of
the
those
Dream
counters.
Weaver. Of course, they're dream counters.
All but N of those counters are removed from it. So it's just, state-based action to check whether or not somehow somebody snuck an 8th dream counter on it, because 8 is just one too many. Yeah.
Next up is Rage Extractor. It is an artifact for 4 and a Phyrexian red mana that says whenever you cast a spell with the generic Phyrexian symbol, or it has a generic Phyrexian symbol in its mana cost, Rage Extractor deals damage equal to that spell's converted mana cost to target creature player. Now, here's the interesting thing. I said a generic Phyrexian symbol, but the generic Phyrexian symbol only appears on this card, and what it means is it means any of the 15 Phyrexian mana symbols. So it's, even though it's the generic Phyrexian symbol, it's really actually quite specific because it encompasses all the Phyrexian symbols. That's it. Oh, hey, look.
Just, of course. Okay, I sigh very heavily because I'm going to break a rule here. I know we're talking a lot about rules, and it's a really rules crunchy episode, but I'm going to break one of the rules that we set early on, which is we're not just going to talk about cards that are unique or that have weird rulings that don't have CR entries. This next card doesn't have a CR entry that is specific to it. Not because it doesn't need it, but just, all right, we're talking about it. You're going to get this one treat, one time, and after this episode, never again. Panglacial Worm. It's a card. It does dumb things. While you're searching your library, you may play Panglacial Worm from your library. Look, nobody ever plays this card. You're only using it to break people's brains in Judge Tower. There are gatherer rulings if you need it. Carry on.
Wow, that was really abrupt.
Wow, that was a little more intense than I was expecting.
Sorry, I just channeled my inner Lewis Black there for a second.
We will say, so there are no unique CR entries for this card, and that's because and it could use some, but it actually can't at the same time, because ultimately what one of the problems is there are cards that allow you to manipulate the top card of your library while you are searching, or rather while you are casting spells. Okay, so like
looking at you, Selvala.
Selvala, yeah. Okay, so those cards don't interact so well together, and there's really nothing you can do in the CR other than say you just can't do it, right?
Right, because our favorite, another non-favorite conspiracy card, Selvala Explorer Returned, has the wonderful ability on it, Parlay, tap. Each player reveals the top card of their library. For each non-land card revealed this way, add green and you gain 1 life. Then each player draws a card. So this just gets really, really dumb. So let's say I activate a fetch land. I start looking through my library. I decide, I know there's a Panglacial Worm in my library. I'm going to attempt to cast it. And as part of casting this, I decide to activate mana abilities, like Selvala's here, which is a mana ability, which then will, first of all, require you to reveal the top card of your library. Now, let's say you're playing a game of Commander and you have a giant, massive library. You pick up half of it. You don't find the card you're looking for. You set it down. You pick up another piece of it. You set that down. Which one was the top one? Oh no, what do I do? The integrity of the top card of your library just kind of poofs once you're in the middle of searching it, because you're actively manipulating your library, not necessarily to gain an advantage, not in a cheaty way, but like you got 100 cards and you got teeny little hands. What are you going to do? So how do you know what was the top card of your library?
Right, but then it gets even more. It's like,
either way, it's just so.
What happens if you activate? Because Savala's got that fun little problem that always comes up of what happens if it doesn't generate, that top card doesn't give you enough mana to cast the spell that you're trying to cast.
Yep. So let's
Yeah.
say I have 3 opponents and I tap that. I get a total of 2 green mana, and I only had 2 other lands.
We've already spent more time than this
Whoops.
thing's worth.
It's dumb. That's why I was just like, carry on. It's a dumb card.
It's a silly place.
It is a silly place. Let's not ever go there again.
Are we done now? Can we move on?
Yes, please.
Okay, cool.
Please.
All right, Obeka, Splitter of Seconds. For 1 and Grixis, is that Grixis? Blue, black, red? I think it is.
Yes.
Yep.
For is a 2/5 legendary creature, Ogre Warlock. She is tough as nails, you can tell. She has Menace, and whenever Obeka, Splitter of Seconds, deals combat damage to a player, you get that many additional upkeep steps after this phase. What the heck is this doing? Let's figure it out. So Obeka does some combat damage to somebody. She wrecks face. And you get that many additional upkeep steps. So you just add 2 upkeep steps, right? Easy, but not necessarily. What actually is happening is you're going to create the actual phase, but you're only going to do the steps. So 500.10 specifies some effects add a step after a particular phase. In that case, the effect first creates the step, or that in that case, push my teeth back in. In that case, that effect first creates the phase, which normally contains the step directly after the specified phase. Any other steps that phase would normally have are skipped. So we're talking about the beginning phase, right? And it has untap, upkeep, draw. But we're only going to get the upkeep part. So we're going to throw out the untap part. We're going to throw out the draw part. That's not going to happen. It's just going to go skip, untap, upkeep, skip, draw, skip, untap, do upkeep, skip, draw. That's how it's going to actually work in the game. But it's like passing priority 9 times out of 10. You just say draw, go. In this case, you're just going to worry about doing the thing, but the rule specifies how it works out.
All right. Next is Minthara, Merciless Soul. For 2 white and a black is a 2/2 legendary creature elf cleric that has a bunch of abilities, but the first one's the one that's relevant. It says Ward X, where X is the number of experience counters you have. So normally we're used to ward being a cost, but not ward being variable. So that's what Rule 702.21b defines, is some ward abilities include X in their cost and state what X is equal to. This value is determined at the time the ability resolves, not locked in as the ability triggers.
Next up, one of my favorite cards from Wild of Eldraine. I'm getting a lot of my favorites on here. Midnight Clock. For 2 and a blue, it's an artifact that taps to add blue mana. Has an ability, 2 and a blue, put an hour counter on Midnight Clock. At the beginning of each upkeep, put an hour counter on Midnight Clock. And when the 12th hour counter is put on Midnight Clock, shuffle your hand and graveyard into your library, then draw 7 cards and exile Midnight Clock. This is pretty straightforward, actually. I'm shocked it took this long for this to be defined, but this defines what the trigger condition for a triggered ability that triggers when or whenever the nth type of counter is put on an object. 122.7 just defines when one or more counters of the appropriate kind are put on the object such that the object had fewer than n counters on it before the counters were put on it and n or more counters on it after. Very regal for a Big Ben looking clock there, but that's why.
Next card's Mandate of Peace. It's a 1 and a white for an instant spell. It has the very relevant text, and we're going to just skip to that says, end the combat phase. Cool. One card, Mandate of Peace, has this phrase on it. And when an effect ends the combat phase, we follow various steps in order. And this differs from the normal process for resolving spells and abilities, because basically we're turning the turn off until we get to the second main. So any triggered abilities that are triggered before this process began, just poof, they cease to exist. We exile every object that's on the stack, including any objects that are in the process of resolving. We are going to check state-based actions. During that time, no player will get priority and no triggered abilities are put on the stack. The current combat phase will just end. All creatures and planeswalkers are removed from combat. Effects that last until end of turn or end of combat are over. The game skips straight to the next phase, which is the post-combat main phase, unless somebody did something weird with Obeka. Isn't it great learning about these new cards or old cards? Even though the combat phase ends at the end of combat, triggered abilities don't trigger because the end of the combat step is actually skipped. We don't get into that. No player gets priority during this process, so triggered abilities are not put on the stack. And if an effect attempts to end the combat phase at any time that's not a combat phase, nothing happens.
Yep. All right. Next up, we're going to talk about 2 cards that are very different, but both do similar things, but they are different enough that they require separate CR entries. The first card is Magar of the Magic String and Garth One-Eye. So Magar is a 3/3 Minotaur performer. It says 1 in a red and a black. Activate. Note the name of target instant or sorcery card in your graveyard and put it onto the battlefield face down. It's a 3/3 creature with, whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, you may create a copy of the card with the noted name. You may cast the copy without paying its mana cost, and some other stuff. And then Garth One-Eye says, tap, choose a card name that hasn't been chosen from among Disenchant, Brain Geyser, Terror, Sheevan Dragon, Regrowth, and Black Lotus. Create a copy of the card with the chosen name. You may cast the copy. So, Magar instructs you to note the name of a particular card in a graveyard and create a copy of the card with the noted name. And it says to do so, the characteristics of the card, use the characteristics of the card as it last existed in the graveyard to determine its copyable values. Okay. Garth One-Eye instructs a player to create a copy of a card defined by the name rather than indicating an object. So Magar was referring to the object that existed in your graveyard. Garth is just basically saying, yeah, you know what a Black Lotus is. And in fact, the rules just say, yeah, just use the Oracle card reference to determine what the characteristics are. All right? And the copy gets created, and create the copy outside of the game, and you can cast it there.
Party on, Garth.
Yeah, YOLO, you know what it is.
You get it.
Yeah.
What you did not know what it was were all of these really fun and weird future sight cards. So going back into the way back, which is weird to say because it's called Future Sight, but Future Sight was a set where Magic just kind of went wild with everything. They tried out one-off cards and wacky designs. They keyworded more mechanics in this one set than I think any other single set ever. And they just went hog wild with creating things, including a bunch of cards that created a mechanic only for this one card that has never been reused. So we're just going to quickly fly through these currently 4 unique cards that have created entire mechanics and thus CR citations for them because they only appear on these one particular card. And funny enough, 2 of them are slivers. First off is Lymph Sliver that says all sliver creatures have Absorb 1, which is a static ability that says if a source would deal damage to this creature, prevent N of that damage. In this case, it would be 1. And that is under 702.64, Absorb. And it has a few more rules there. Not going to dive into all those because this episode is long enough.
It's the way you said it, it was like, that is 702.64, Absorb. And it just struck me as like someone doing something from a spelling bee. You know? Yes, 702.64, Absorb. Can you use it in a sentence, please?
This mechanic was needed to describe Absorb. Next up, we have Frenzy Sliver, which is the same as Lymph Sliver, except it says all sliver creatures have Frenzy 1. Frenzy N means whenever this creature attacks and isn't blocked, it gets +N+0 until end of turn. And if you have multiple instances, each triggers separately because you can have multiple of these out on the field. Oh, sorry. Frenzy is 702.68. Frenzy. We then have Flesh Writher, 2 black for a creature horror that has Transfigure 1 black. Transfigure is 702.71. Transfigure.
Can I get
it's
that
an
used in a
activated
sentence,
ability,
please?
Yes. Transfigure is an activated ability. Period. Transfigure means pay this cost, sacrifice this permanent, search your library for a creature card with the same mana value as this permanent, and put it onto the battlefield. Then shuffle your library, activate only as a sorcery. And then Arcanum Wings, 1 and a blue for an enchantment aura that has enchant creature. Enchanted creature has flying, and it has aura swap for 2 and a blue. Aura swap is 702.65. Aura swap. This is an activated ability of some aura cards. That means you pay this cost and you may exchange this permanent with an aura card in your hand.
What is the language of origin?
English? Final answer? Is that how spelling bees work? I've never competed in a spelling bee ever.
The fun thing about Future Sight cards is this. These are 4 of the remaining unique one-off mechanics from the set that have not been reused yet. Most of them have been. Otherwise, this particular list of cards and examples would be longer. Check back with us in about 4 or 5 years when we have finally seen the reuse of the keywords absorb, frenzy, transfigure, and aura swap, and this section has nothing left in it. Kaya the Inexorable is next. She is a planeswalker, 3 white and a black, legendary planeswalker Kaya with 5 loyalty, and she has a neat loyalty ability -7. You get an emblem with, at the beginning of your upkeep, you may cast a legendary spell from your hand, from your graveyard, or from among cards you own in exile without paying its mana cost. It's that exile part that required a CR entry. 601.3f says some effects allow a player to cast a spell with certain qualities from among face-down cards in exile. This is one of them, where this is the one, actually. A player may begin to cast such a spell only if they can look at the face-down card in exile, i.e. if for some reason it's face-down and your opponent controls it in exile, you can't actually look at it. Or if an instruction in the game tells you that the card is to remain face down in exile in your control, you can't look at it and cast it using this ability.
Yeah, because this is just looking at legendary spells from cards you own in exile, not necessarily cards exiled with Kaya. So you could actually have cards that are face down in exile from some other source. All right. Ugh. Karn liberated.
Enough said. Move on.
Yeah.
Lucky you.
All right. Yeah. Oh, look at that. 7 mana planeswalker, 6 loyalty legendary planeswalker Karn, -14. Restart the game. I'm not gonna read the other abilities. Restart the game. Leaving in exile all non-aura permanent cards exiled with Karn liberated, then put those cards onto the battlefield under your control. All right. So there's a whole section for restarting the game. We're just gonna go through here real simple. All right. Restarting the game. So Karn restarts the game. A game that's being restarted immediately ends. Players don't win, lose, draw that game. All players that are in that game when it ended, they start a new game. Okay? With some exceptions. With the exception, the player who controlled the ability that started the game gets to go first. Now, there's a whole bunch of rules related to this, and we've already been going on for like an hour, and we still got a bunch more. So I invite you to read the rules. There are only like 12 of them associated. I do actually have a question for Marcos, though, with CEDH. Okay.
I knew this was coming.
Yep. Okay, so here's my question with CEDH. All right. Because if a player gets eliminated, so you're playing 4 players, and a player gets eliminated, so there's only 3 players in the game, and that game ends in a draw. All 4 players get credit for a draw, correct? Even the player that got eliminated?
Yes.
Okay, so in a CEDH game, one of those players gets eliminated, and I Karn. The game, according to the rules, we're going to start with 3 players, not that 4th player, right? If that game ends in a draw, does that 4th player still get a draw?
Yep.
No way.
Okay, so here's the thing.
The match ends in a draw.
Look.
Therefore, all players involved in the match
We need to
would
have
be
a
the ones who get the draw.
conversation about
Okay.
this. Do it
Look,
another
realistically,
time. But
this almost
seriously,
never
that's
happens,
silly.
and we'll deal with it when it does. 'Cause
That's a fine answer.
that's kind of where we're at with it.
You know, the wonderful thing, and I was thinking like with Commander, like there used to be like a whole lot of like call me when it happens kind of stuff because the rules were kind of squishy in a particular area. Like, yeah, I'll figure that out when it happens. But with actual money on the line in these CEDH tournaments, they can actually happen, and you need to come up with answers for this stuff.
Yep. It's on the list. I can assure you that. It is not
This
one that's
happens
a high
enough to be on
priority
the list?
but no, that's the thing. That's why it's so low on the list. It's a thing that we know somebody's like people ask enough about it, but nobody ever actually tries to do it because Karn is just not playable in CDH typically. So
I am going to tell you one thing about Karn restarting the game. All right, that I know. Like I said, there's like 10 rules for restarting the game, and you'll probably need to reference them if this comes up in a game. However, in a multiplayer game using the limited range of influence, okay, if that game is restarted, all players in that game involved, regardless of the range of influence of the player who controls the ability of that game, is restarted. So if you ever play Grand Melee and activate a Karn, you restart the game for everyone.
yes,
provided that they don't just kill you and then you've been
In
removed
real life,
from the
you mean.
game. Right, what's that? Yes.
in real life, right?
In real life, and then you have left the game and your ability leaves the stack.
Comment in the comments below what your favorite Karn rulings are. Mine is Magic subgame related, and that's all I'm going to say about that. Continue.
Yeah, the effect that restarts the game finishes resolving just before the first turn's untap step. So if the spell or ability that generated that effect has additional instructions, those instructions are followed at this time. Okay, no player gets priority. Any triggered abilities that trigger as a result will go on the stack the next time a player receives priority, which is coming up in just a half a second. And that's the first turn's upkeep step.
Got him.
Yep.
Let's move on to something simpler, shall we? Jared, Carthalion, True Heir for red, green, and white is a 3/3, and it says when Jared enters the battlefield, target opponent becomes the monarch. You can't become the monarch this turn. If damage will be dealt to Jared Carthalion while you're the monarch, prevent that damage and put that many +1/+1 counters on it. So this really just walks around the fact that it adds in the rules text that you can't become the monarch this turn. Specifically, if the monarch leaves the game, 724.4, the active player becomes the monarch at the same time as that player leaves the game. If the active player is leaving the game or there's no active player, the next player in turn order becomes the monarch. If no player, and this is the important part for this, if no player still in the game can become the monarch, the game continues with no monarch. Because what happens if we're in a CDH game, I play a Jared, I knock out Bryan, monarch would go to me next, or everybody has a Jared because I'm cloning it a bunch of times. Nobody can become the monarch. You have to have a rule that says what happens if none of us can become the monarch.
Cool.
Easy enough.
All right, next up, we're going to talk about Henzi Toolbox Tori. Is for a black, a red, and a green is a 3/3 Devil Rogue that says each creature spell you cast with mana value 4 or greater has Blitz, and the Blitz cost is equal to its mana cost. Now this one caused a little bit of turmoil because when it was initially released, it didn't quite work because the Blitz ability has multiple parts to it, and some of it functions while the spell is on the stack, and some of it functions while it's on the battlefield. So giving the Blitz ability to the spell on the stack, well, when it became a permanent, it didn't have that anymore. And so that was an issue for a while. And then they came out with Sarah's Paragon, which we mentioned a little bit ago, and they put out 2 rules that, while had either one of the cards been released, then these would be unique CR entries for those cards. Okay, but since they've put out both of them, it's really just a twofer. So 400.7b says effects from static abilities that grant an ability to a permanent spell that functions on the battlefield continue to apply to the permanent that spell becomes. Okay, and also 611.3d says continuous effects from static abilities may allow a player to play a land, that's the Sarah Paragon part, or cast a permanent spell, that's either Torre or Sarah's Paragon, or may grant an ability to a permanent spell or card that allows it to be cast. If the effect also grants that object an ability that functions only on the battlefield, that ability lasts as long as stated by the effect granting that permission or ability. If no duration is stated, it lasts until the end of the game. This is an exception to some of the previous rules. So that handles Henze, that handles Sarah Paragon. Then we've got this other card called Zinnia Valley's Voice, which is a 1/3 legendary creature, bird bard for blue, red, and a white. It's flying. Okay, only instead of giving blitz, it says creature spells you cast have offspring. Okay, offspring is an additional cost, and this is where things get a little weird, possibly a little bit of a hole. 400.7.b still applies to Zinnia. Because it is an effect from a static ability that grants an ability to a permanent spell that functions on blah, 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 blah. However, 611.3d is only talking about continuous effects from static abilities that allow it to be cast. Offspring does not allow the spell to be cast. It's only an additional cost. So, just for the sake of clarity, this is a interaction that looks like on the surface it makes a CR not unique, but in fact it doesn't apply. There's a gap, and the rules wouldn't be unique anyway because of Sarah Paragon and Henze anyway. All right, clear as mud. Cool.
So the next one we're going to talk about is Hackbell of the Surging Soul for 2 and a green and a blue. It is a 3/3 legendary creature, Merfolk Scout. At the beginning of combat on your turn, each Merfolk creature you control explores. So, and let's see, does the rest of it matter? No, I don't think so. So this requires a CR entry 701.44d. CR entries get pretty complex and layered, and in the 701s, there are a lot of them. And it says, if multiple permanents are instructed to explore at the same time, the first player in AppNap order who controls, or in the case of a permanent no longer on the battlefield, last controlled, see Rule 701.44c, the previous rule, one or more of these permanents chooses one of them and it explores. Then this process is repeated for each remaining instruction to explore. Yeah.
Next up, we have Grist the Hunger Tide. For 1 green and a black, it is a Grist Planeswalker with 3 loyalty that has several loyalty abilities, but we're only concerned with the static ability here that says as long as Grist the Hunger Tide isn't on the battlefield, it's a 1/1 insect creature in addition to its other types. Now, there is a rule that says 113.6 that says, hey, instants and sorceries usually function, or abilities on instants and sorceries usually only function while the object's on the stack, and then abilities of all other objects usually function while that object is on the battlefield. And then it lists a bunch of exceptions. Well, here we have an ability that wants to function everywhere but the battlefield, so obviously it's got to have an exception. And the exception that it has is an ability which states which zones it doesn't work in functions everywhere except the zones that it says it doesn't work in, even outside the game and before the game begins. So when it says Grist the Hunger Tide, while it isn't on the battlefield, that's everywhere. That Grist the Hunger Tide in your binder right now is a 1/1 insect creature.
Ew, get it off.
Yep.
Next up is Gift of Doom for 4 and a black. It is an enchantment aura with enchanted creature. Enchanted creature has death touch and indestructible, and morph. So it has the morph ability that lets you cast it face down as a 2/2 creature for 3 generic mana, and it has a morph ability to turn it face up by sacrificing another creature. Gross. And as it's turned face up, you may attach it to a creature. So as Gift of Doom is turned face up, you may attach it to a creature. How does one do that? Effectively, this CR is just talking through how to turn an aura card that is face down on the battlefield face up and how that works. So 303.4K, if an effect allows an aura that's being turned face up to become attached to an object or player, the aura's controller considers the characteristics of that aura as it would exist if it were face up to determine what it may be attached to. And they must choose a legal object or player according to the aura's enchant ability and any other applicable effects. This is what prevents you from getting away with aura shenanigans like you might do. Let's say you are bringing an aura back from your graveyard onto the battlefield through some other effect. As long as it can find an object it can attach to, it will. This just allows you to make sure that everything about it is legal and that you are good to go.
So if it can't attach to anything, if it has no legal targets when you're turning it face up, it just remains face down, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Firk Rag Cunning Investigator is 3 a blue and a red for a 3/3 legendary creature dragon. Just look at him. He is a proper dragon. Firk Rag has the text Flying Haste. Whenever one or more dragons you control attack an opponent, go to target creature that player controls. The part that we're interested in is the next trigger. Whenever a creature deals combat damage to one of your opponents, if that creature had to attack this combat, you put a +1/+1 counter on Firk Rag and you draw a card. That's really interesting language. If that creature had to attack this combat. I don't think I've seen that anywhere before. So we have a CR that helps us with this. It's 506.6. It says some abilities. Isn't that interesting? As we go through this, I think a lot of times it talks about abilities or effects in the plural as if there are multiples, and that's just future proofing. We know that it's only for one thing here. Some abilities check to see whether or not a creature had to attack during a particular combat phase. A creature had to attack if one or more effects were requiring that creature to attack at the time attackers were declared in that combat. A creature did not have to attack if there were no such effects that required it to attack, even if there were no other legal attacks that could have been declared, or if it were goblins and, they're just going to attack anyway.
All right. Next up is Fealty to the Realm. For 4 and a blue, it is an enchantment aura with enchant creature. It says when Fealty to the Realm enters the battlefield, you become the monarch, and the monarch controls the enchanted creature. Okay, so here is just this shows you like the crazy detail that they gotta put rules in here for. Okay, because here's the question. There is a brief period of time because becoming the monarch is a triggered ability. Right, when this thing enters. But the card says the monarch controls enchanted creatures. So there is a period of time, if no one is the monarch, when you cast this spell, that we have Fealty to the Realm, enchanting a creature that says the monarch controls the enchanted creature, but there is no monarch, because the trigger hasn't resolved yet to make you the monarch. So they had to create a rule, 724.5. If the result of a continuous effect generated by a static ability is determined based on who the current monarch is, but there's no monarch in the game as the effect begins to apply, that effect does nothing until a player becomes the monarch.
This is very much a don't look at the man behind the curtain thing. Right? That's funny.
And next up, from one of my favorite blocks of all time, this is Ethereal Ambush, 3, a green and a blue, for an instant that says, manifest the top 2 cards of your library. That's it. Super easy. And the rule here is 701.40E. If an effect instructs a player to manifest multiple cards from their library, those cards are manifested one at a time. Now, this card is currently marked as unique in Scryfall's tagging system. However, there is another card that could potentially do this depending on circumstances. So Omarthis Ghostfire Initiate has the ability, when Omarthus dies, manifest a number of cards from the top of your library equal to the number of counters on it. So if it has 1/1/1 counter on it, well then doesn't apply. But it could have more, so technically not unique, but also very narrow to begin with. And here, ultimately, the whole purpose of this, why do you have to determine manifest one at a time? I'm assuming it has to do with our good old friend Courser of Crufix or telepathy style effects that have you play with the top card of your library revealed. If you're manifesting multiple cards, well, you have to reveal what the top card of your library is at any time as you're moving cards out of your library. So do them one at a time and you can see it.
Yeah, this is kind of weird because this might get into like English parsing, because Ethereal Ambush says manifest the top 2 cards of your library, where Omarthus is saying manifest a number of cards from the top. So Omarthus kind of has a phrasing in it, like just the plain English meaning of words, that kind of implies that you're doing it one at a time. Okay, but at the same time,
I could see you just grabbing the top 2 and dropping them on the table and being like, creatures, go. What up?
Right, but I think
Not
you need to do
proper.
it one at a time, because there's the cards that let you play with the top card of your library revealed. So,
yep.
Next card we have is Enhanced Surveillance for 1 and a blue. It's an enchantment. It says you may look at an additional 2 cards each time you surveil. It also has an exile effect for to shuffle your graveyard into your library. But what we're interested in is this additional 2 cards each time you surveil. Seems simple, right? Well, the game rules don't actually support that until we look at 701.25b. And that states if an effect allows you to look at additional cards while you surveil, those cards are included among the cards you may put in your graveyard and on top of your library in any order. Because otherwise you'd be looking at, if you had surveil 2, you'd be looking at 4 cards and you could only do something with the 2 cards on top. It seems kind of silly, right? So effectively what it's doing is it's changing surveil N to surveil N plus 2 anytime you surveil while this enchantment's on the battlefield.
all right. Next up is Elemental Resonance. It is 2 green. It says it is enchant permanent that says at the beginning of your main phase, add mana equal to enchanted permanent's mana cost. All right. So this one actually has 2 rules associated with it. The first is if an effect would add mana represented by a generic mana symbol to a player's mana pool, that much colorless mana is added to that player's mana pool instead. Okay. And if an effect would add mana represented by 1 or more snow mana symbols to a player's pool, that much colorless mana is added instead. So there's if a card costs snow mana and you enchant it with elemental resonance, just the generic snow mana symbol, how do you...
You mean the one that's kind of like Snow Moon? That's Snow Moon?
Yes.
Sorry.
I think he says it. I'm just going to let that hang there for
Yeah, I am just letting it hang there. Can you use it in a sentence?
I think I just did. That's Snow Moon. That's a battle station.
I love it. I guess it's my turn. Okay. Edgar, King of Figaro. 4 blue for a human artificer noble. Oh, a king? That's a noble. That's interesting. Cool. It's a 4/5 legendary creature. When Edgar enters, draw a card for each artifact you control. And it has 2-headed coin. The first time you flip 1 or more coins each turn, those coins come up heads and you win those flips. So here, this caused the creation of 705.3, which says an effect may state that a coin flip has a certain result, and or that a certain player wins a coin flip. In that case, ignore the actual results of that flip and use the indicated results instead. This can cause a player to win a flip that couldn't otherwise be won. Weird, but sure. This is what happens when you play with 2-sided coins. Or two-headed coins, rather.
Right. The next is Drain Power for 2 blue. It is a sorcery, and it has the Oracle text, because I'm looking at the old art of the card, and it's definitely not how it reads today. Target player activates a mana ability on each land they control. Then that player loses all unspent mana, and you add the mana lost this way. This required the creation of 106.13, and it states one card, Drain Power, causes one player to lose unspent mana and another to add the mana lost this way. Note that these may be the same player. This empties the former player's mana pool and causes the mana emptied this way to be put into the latter player's mana pool, which permanents, spells, and or abilities produced that mana are unchanged, as are any restrictions or additional effects associated with any of that mana.
Wait, does this mean that people were trying to like money launder their mana that had restrictions and stuff on it by using Drain Power?
Yeah, I don't. It's weird, right? Maybe that's why it was around. It's an old card, so I don't know what the purpose was. I don't think all old cards always had a purpose.
What?
Maybe this one
No,
did, though.
this used to be this actually used to be pretty decent.
Like a kill condition, no?
No, it wasn't a kill condition. I mean, you still got the mana, but it was a lot more because of mana burn was a thing.
Right.
Okay.
Oh,
Yeah.
gotcha. Okay.
That's a very blue thing.
That is.
Right. Okay. So the next card up is Doubling Cube. Okay, for 2 mana, it is a 2 mana artifact that says 3 tap, double the amount of each type of mana in your mana pool. All right. To double the amount of type of mana in your mana pool, that player adds an amount of mana of that type equal to the amount they already had. Now, unlike our Drain Power, which kept all of the restrictions and additional effects and all that kind of stuff, Doubling Cube actually does let you launder the mana. Because it's just creating an amount of the mana of the right type. So if there's any restrictions or specialness to that mana, you don't get it. You just get double.
Got him. I knew there was a way to launder money in Magic. Wait, that might be a much more meta comment than I thought. Anyways, Cryptic Spires is a land. As you create your deck, circle 2 of the colors below. And it has 5 mana symbols at the bottom, 1 for each of the colors of mana. Remember, colorless is not a color. And it also says Cryptic Spires enters the battlefield tapped, and tap, add 1 mana of either of the circled colors. This one created 207.5 that basically walks you through what it means to instruct a player to circle a physical part of the card as they're creating their deck and what the limitations are of it. So to circle a color, the player circles that color's symbol. You can't see me doing it, but I'm doing a giant thumbs up with a very sardonic grin. And then the mana symbol of each circled color is considered part of that card's printed rules text and affects that card's color identity for the purposes of Commander, which is usually the only place you'll actually play this anyways.
Yeah, I don't even see it in Commander decks. I think it was really unique and important to the set that it came out in for the limited play experience that was involved with it. But then after that, I've never seen one in the wild. That doesn't mean that you can't do it. It's just, I honestly think that it's just not used. The next card is a card. Oh, speaking of circles, the next card is Circling Vultures. When this idea for the show was proposed, there were a couple cards that I was pretty sure would be in here. This one I absolutely knew for certain was going to be in here. I can't remember when I learned about it, but I knew it had unique CR attached to it. It's for 1 black, a 3/2 summon birds. It has, you may discard this card anytime you could cast an instant. At the beginning of your upkeep, sacrifice this creature unless you exile the top creature card of your graveyard. It's actually a special action. There's a list of special actions that we have in Magic, and there's one special action that applies only to this card. And If you look at 116.2e, it says one card has the ability you may discard circling vultures anytime you could cast an instant. Doing so is a special action. A player can take such an action anytime they have priority. Nifty. I don't know why you'd want to do it, but neat.
Huh? Just old card does old thing.
Yes.
Yep. All right. Here's new card does new thing. Centaur of Attention is 3 green for a 3/3 Centaur performer that says when Centaur of Attention enters the battlefield, roll 5 6-sided die and store those results on it. Then at the beginning of your upkeep, you may re-roll any number of Centaur of Attention's stored results, and it gets +X, where X is the greatest number of stored results on it of the same value. So basically, 706.8 deals with what does it mean to store results of a dice roll, and it works more or less exactly as the way that you would think. Like, it's a lot of words that just basically describe it. So thanks for dialing in. Thanks for listening this long on our Insightful Rules podcast of, the rules just say it works the way you think it does. I don't know. I mean, it's just like, what do you want me to do? I'm going to read a whole bunch of stuff about, like, to store the result of a die roll on a permanent means to note both the kind of die rolled and the result of that roll. The noted information is considered a stored result of that permanent, and the result is the value of that stored result.
So store the result.
Yes. Otherwise, blah, 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 store the result.
Dope.
Yes.
Speaking of cards that just work the way you expect them to, let's talk about Celebrate 1000, another unset card that is legal in tournament play. For 5 mana, it's a 3/3 artifact creature clown robot. At the beginning of combat on your turn, roll 2 6-sided dice. For each result of 1, Celebrate 1000 gets +1/+1 till end of turn. For each other result, it gains the indicated ability until end of turn. If you rolled doubles, it also gains double strike until end of turn. This just...
Yeah.
This codifies Monopoly into Magic the Gathering. Rolling doubles means rolling doubles.
Just don't do it 3 times
Roll
in a
2
row.
dice.
You'll go to jail.
That's a different Magic card, sir.
Yes.
You roll doubles. 2 of the same. Carry on.
Yeah. The next card we have is Karth the Lion. Earlier we were talking about Garth. Now we're talking about Karth. Please pay attention. We've gone into the seas. This is 2, a black and a green for 3/5, a legendary creature human warrior with the text, whenever Karth the Lion enters the battlefield or a planeswalker you control dies, look at the top 7 cards of your library when you reveal a planeswalker card from among them and put them into your hand. Put the rest in the bottom of your library in a random order. Planeswalker loyalty abilities you activate cost an additional +1 to activate, and it has the Planeswalker loyalty ability symbol surrounding the +1. This necessitated the creation of 606.5. If the total cost to activate a loyalty ability contains multiple costs to add or remove loyalty counters, those costs are combined into a single cost to add or remove loyalty counters as appropriate. So if you were activating some ability that's a +3 and it needs to have the additional +1, you treat it, and the game treats it as +4, not +1.
Yeah, I think this is like if you have like a -1 ability and then this is a +1 ability, it's just 0. It's not I remove a loyalty counter and then I add a loyalty counter.
Yeah.
It's just all one thing.
Yep.
All right, next up is Bruvac the Grandiloquent. All right, for 2 and a blue, it's a 1/4. If an opponent would mill 1 or more cards, they mill twice that many cards instead. All right, seems easy. And there's a lot of cards that that if this wouldn't work with or would have weird interactions, they don't actually say mill. They say put the number of cards in the top of your library. All right. For cards that would interact badly with this. However, there is a rule, 701.17d, that says if an ability checks information about a single milled card, but more than one card was milled, that ability refers to each of the milled cards. If that ability asks for information about the milled card, such as a characteristic or a mana value, it gets multiple answers. If these answers are used to determine the value of a variable, the sum of the answers is used. Some other stuff. So I think this was for cards like, there's a card, when I was looking to try to figure out when this was, there's a card called Heed the Mist. Okay, Heed the Mist says, is for 3 blue, mill a card, then draw cards equal to the milled card's mana value. Okay, and so right here, if that ability asks for any information about the milled card, such as the characteristics or mana value, it gets back multiple answers. So with Heed the Mist, it says mill a card, then draw cards equal to the milled card's mana value. So the CR says if that ability asks for any information about the milled card, such as a characteristic or mana value, it gets multiple answers. If these answers are used to determine the value of a variable, the sum of that answers is used. Well, how many cards am I drawing now? Sum of both.
All of them.
Yeah. All right.
Next up we have Benevolent Blessing. For 1 and a white, this is an enchantment aura with flash. Enchant creature as Benevolent Blessing enters the battlefield, choose a color. Enchanted creature has protection from the chosen color. This effect doesn't remove auras and equipment you control that are already attached to it. And I believe this is due to the equipment part, because there were auras beforehand that would say a creature got protection from a color, but that didn't remove other auras on it. I think this effectively expands it out to anything that is attached to the creature and kind of defines what are already attached to means within the rules. So 702.16p, 1 aura gives the enchanted creature protection from a quality and says the effect doesn't remove certain permanents that are already attached to that creature. This means that when this protection effect starts to apply, any objects with the stated quality that are already attached to that creature, including the aura giving that creature protection, will not be put into the owner's graveyard as a state-based action. Other permanents with the stated quality can't become attached to the creature. It effectively just makes sure you don't lose what you already have, but then protection works the way you normally expect it to.
Next, we have Averna the Chaos Bloom. For green, blue, and a red, it is a 4/2 legendary creature, Elemental Shaman. Really cool looking art. It has As You Cascade. Oh, this is going to be fun, right? You may put a land card from among the exiled cards onto the battlefield tapped. You do this. It has helpful reminder text because this is a little bit of an oddball. It says you do this after the last card is exiled, but before deciding whether or not to cast a non-land card using the Cascade ability. So, interestingly enough, this is telling you to do something that's interrupting something else that's happening, and we need a special CR for it. That one is 702.85b. If an effect allows a player to take an action with one or more of the exiled cards as you cascade, so you're doing your cascade, you're flipping cards over, you've got 5, 6, 7 cards exiled, and you hit the card that you want to use. You've got all these cards exiled. Maybe one of them is a land card. And in this case, the player can take the action after they've finished exiling cards due to the cascade ability. So you can take that land card and put it onto the battlefield tap. Note, it doesn't say basic land card. It can be any card with the type land. This action is taken before choosing whether to cast the last exiled card, or if no appropriate card was exiled, before putting the cards onto the bottom of the library in a random order. So you get to do it whether or not you cascade, so long as you're cascading. Make sense?
Oh, yeah.
Awesome.
Okay, Aven Mind Sensor. All right, for 2 and a white, it is a 2/1 bird wizard with flash and fly. It says if an opponent would search a library, that player searches the top 4 cards of that library instead. Okay, we have rule 701.23f. If searching a zone is replaced with searching a portion of that zone, any other instructions that refer to searching the zone still apply. Any abilities that trigger on a library being searched will still trigger. Example, Aven Mind Sensor says, in part, if an opponent would search a library, that player searches the top 4 cards of that library instead. Veteran Explorer says, when this creature dies, each player may search their library for up to 2 basic land cards, then put them onto the battlefield and then shuffle. An opponent who searches the top 4 cards of their library would still shuffle their entire library. Okay, so you search the top 4 cards of the library because Veteran Explorer says to search. You're still going to shuffle the entire library, not just the top 4 cards of your library.
Okay, so let's talk about Ashiok Wicked Manipulator.
This one's fun.
This really is. I'm actually
fun,
excited to talk about this one.
They're all fun.
Different levels of fun. So, 3 black legendary planeswalker Ashiok. We're just going to talk about the main static ability on it that says, if you would pay life while your library has at least that many cards in it, exile that many cards from the top of your library instead. So, here's the scenario. I have an effect, let's call it a Courser Crucifix, on the battlefield that lets me play lands from the top of my library. I have, let's say, a breeding pool on top of my library. I decide, oh, okay, I'm going to play the breeding pool from the top of my library. But breeding pool has this replacement effect that says, as this land enters, you may pay 2 life. If you do, it enters untapped. So, I decide I'm going to pay 2 life. Ashiok says, if you would pay life while your library has at least that many cards in it, exile that many cards from the top of your library. What happens to your breeding pool? Did you just wreck yourself out of a breeding pool? Well, that would be what would happen if it weren't for 614.13c. While applying a replacement effect that modifies how a permanent enters the battlefield, another replacement effect may cause a player to mill cards or exile cards from the top of a library. In that case, any card that is entering the battlefield from that library won't be included in that effect, even though those cards are in the library as the effect is applied. This is my favorite because I get a lot of questions from players asking like, oh, where is this card when I'm choosing whether it comes in with this replacement effect or not? And I go, well, it's where it was before. So in this instance, it's in the library. It's not on the battlefield yet when you're choosing whether you pay 2 life for it or not. And if it weren't for this rule, it would go poof. But this rule exists just to make sure that it works the way you expect it to.
So I get to do Arcbound Wanderer, which is not quite, I think it might actually be the last card, and we're going to talk about a few others just to round things out, but I think it's the last card in our list. Arcbound Wanderer for 6 is a 0/0 artifact creature golem. It has the rules text on it, or the text box states, modular sunburst. My brain just halted. So these 2 words, modular, then sunburst. Sunburst is a static ability, and sunburst basically means when creature enters the battlefield, it enters with +1/+1 counters on it for each color of mana spent to cast it. So if you were to spend 5 different colors of mana in casting Arcbound, it would enter with 5 +1/+1 counters on it. Same is true of any other of the wonderful artifact creatures that were from that era. The modular part of it's what's really neat, is modular's modifying the sunburst a little bit, and it's saying, oh yeah, by the way, when this dies, you can put those +1/+1 counters on another target artifact creature. I just think it's so cool.
Yes, however, that's why this rule is special, because it's a static ability that can also be used as a variable number for another ability. So that's why it's got to be special. The result of that static ability can be used as like an input into another ability.
Yeah. So not modular 4, it's modular whatever you sunburst.
Yeah, you could actually do something stupid like hideaway sunburst.
I want to design some dumb magic cards now.
Yeah, holy crap! Yes, you could do it that way.
So cool.
Hideaway sunburst. All right, so there's a few other cards. There's really like 5 other cards to mention. We're gonna group 3 of them together. These are the the cards that name sets. So you have like City in a Bottle, which says whenever a non-token permanent originally printed in the Arabian Nights expansion other than City in the Bottle is put on the battlefield, its controller sacrifices it. and players can't play cards originally printed in the Arabian Nights expansion. And there is an Apocalypse Chime for Homelands and a Gogoldian Silex for Antiquities. And so each of these cards now refers to cards originally printed in their respective sets. And there is a CR entry that lists every single one of those cards that was originally printed in those sets. Fortunately, they weren't super big. And for folks who are really, really, really old, you might actually remember what the world was like before they did it this way, and it actually legitimately looked at the expansion symbols printed on the cards. That was a
glad
thing.
they did away with that.
That was a thing. And we got all sorts of questions about, like, Judge, if I'm, what happens if my opponent plays a City in the Bottle and I'm playing mountains from Arabian Nights? Can I swap my mountains out? Those were questions.
I believe it.
All right. And we got two more.
Oh, yes. So we have an honorable mention. Charles, you want to do the first one? I feel like that's more in your wheelhouse.
Definitely in my wheelhouse, right? We have the honorable mention of Steam Flogger Boss, which is for 3 in a red, a 3/3 creature goblin rigger. And it said other rigger creatures you control get +1/+0 and have haste. And I believe the reason it's here is because there were no other rigger creatures when it was actually created.
No, it's the only non-acorn silver border card that actually tells you how to assemble a contraption, or tells you to assemble a contraption.
Oh, and that too. But I also think that there weren't any other rigger creatures at the time.
I mean, that's just a creature type, right?
Right. But yeah. And then the contraption part is really important. I forgot. I blitzed on that. Okay, it happens. But contraptions are something that were not invented until many, many sets later when it wasn't Unfinity. It was unsanctioned. Unstable.
Yeah.
When Unstable came out, we finally had contraptions. And suddenly Steam Flogger Boss was everywhere because they printed 1 million of them for the set, and nobody really used it. But it was there.
There is actually a CR entry for Assemble, and it basically says, just go look at the Unstable facts. It literally is just like, yeah. Cards and mechanics from Unstable sets aren't included in these rules. See the Unstable facts for more information. It literally just olays you into this other doc. Yeah, go look over there.
Oh, man.
Go away, kid, you bother me.
So who gets Shahrazad?
Speaking of go away, kid, you bother me. What's next?
The last one we're going to cover is one I actually alluded to already earlier in the episode, but this is Shahrazad. Players, it's a sorcery for white, because this effect costs 2 mana at one point, because that's reasonable. Players play a magic subgame using their libraries as their decks. Each player who doesn't win the subgame loses half their life, rounded up. This is the only Black Border tournament legal card that cares about subgames. There are some unset ones, like I think Venture into the Dungeon, funny enough, is a magic subgame card that makes you try to play a subgame under the table, but that's not tournament magic. Shahrazad is, in some ways, except it's banned everywhere, except maybe like your LGS on that wacky Friday night that they play.
What fun.
Yeah, so I think I don't remember a whole lot of the story, but like Shahrazad as a character from 1001 Nights, she's basically, and people can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think she's like the wife of like a mean, cruel king who's like gonna like kills a wife every morning or something like that. So Shahrazad stays alive by telling him a story every night, and every night she ends on a cliffhanger. So he's got to spare her life to hear the rest of the story.
Yeah, she's the narrator for 1001 Arabian Nights.
Is she?
No? I believe so. Like that's why there's 1001.
It's because every night is the tale. Oh, that's clever.
You can't tell us you didn't learn something this episode, folks.
No, I mean you can.
Sure.
I'm sure somebody would, but yeah.
So thanks for bearing with us for this action-packed mega episode. Have fun editing this, Marcos.
Is that just the challenge on every episode now? Just like, good luck editing this, have fun?
Next episode is going to be, what's something that we can do that's going to make you go crazy editing?
Well, I think the next episode probably ends up being release notes.
I think we need a soundboard.
We do need one. Absolutely. That's definitely on my want list. Almost before Patreon.
I have ideas. I have ideas now.
I bet.
Stop putting these ideas in my head, guys. I will do them.
No, we need it. We need it because
Okay.
we need cats and dogs. You know, we need. Yeah. Anyway. All right. That's our episode. Join us next time as we talk about something that sounds a little less like a chaotic release notes episode on 4 Monster Energy Drinks #not sponsored in 2 hours of sleep. Until then, you can send us an email at judgecast@gmail.com. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Blue Sky at judgecast.bsky.social, and on Twitter at JudgeCast. Don't forget to check out our show notes for these links and more, including our YouTube channel where you can find this podcast and our L1 Essentials series. While you're at it, hop onto our Discord server for judges new and old, fans, and anyone who supports the judging community. I'm Charles Feather, and I keep it fair.
I'm Marcos Sanchez, and I keep it fun.
I'm Bryan Perlman, and I'm Antediluvian. Antediluvian. Antediluvian.